a high-altitude photo reconnaissance adaptation of the Comet 1. The Ghost DGT-3 powered airframe featured a narrowed fuselage, a bulbous nose with H-2S Mk9 radar, and a 4-crew-member pressurized cockpit under a large bubble canopy. Fuel tanks carrying 2,400 imperial gallons, 11,000 L, were added to attain a range of 3,350 miles, 5,390 kilometers. The proposed DH-111 received a negative evaluation from the Royal Aircraft Establishment over serious concerns regarding weapons storage. This, along with the redundant capability offered by the RAF's proposed V-bomber trio, led de Havilland to abandon the project on the 22nd of October, 1948. Comet 2, edit. The Comet 2 had a slightly larger wing, higher fuel capacity and more powerful Rolls-Royce Avon engines, which all improved the aircraft's range and performance. Its fuselage was 3 feet 1 in, 0.94 m, longer than the Comet 1's. Design changes had been made to make the aircraft more suitable for transatlantic operations. Following the Comet 1 disasters, these models were rebuilt with heavier gauge skin and rounded windows, and the Avon engines featuring larger air intakes and outward curving jet tailpipes. A total of 12 of the 44-seat Comet 2s were ordered by Bork for the South Atlantic route. The first production aircraft, G-ANXA, flew on the 27th of August, 1953. Although these aircraft performed well on test flights on the South Atlantic, their range was still not suitable for the North Atlantic. All but 4 Comet 2s were allocated to the RAF, deliveries beginning in 1955. Modifications to the interiors allowed the Comet 2s to be used in several roles. For VIP transport, the seating and accommodations were altered and provisions for carrying medical equipment including iron lungs were incorporated. Specialized signals intelligence and electronic surveillance capability was later added to some airframes. One Comet 2X, limited to a single Comet Mk1 powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Avon 502 turbojet engines and used as a development aircraft for the Comet 2. 2 Comet 2E, 2 Comet 2 airliners were fitted with Avon 504s in the inner nacelles and Avon 524s in the outer ones. These aircraft were used by Bork for proving flights during 1957-1958. 3 Comet T2, the first 2 of 10 Comet 2s for the RAF were fitted out as crew trainers. The first aircraft, XK669, flying initially on the 9th of December, 1955. 4 Comet C2, 8 Comet 2s originally destined for the civil market were completed for the RAF and assigned to number 216 Squadron. 5 Comet 2R, 3 Comet 2s were modified for use in radar and electronic systems development, initially assigned to number 90 Group, later Signals Command, for the RAF. In service with number 192 and number 51 squadrons, the 2R series was equipped to monitor Warsaw Pact signal traffic and operated in this role from 1958. Comet 3, edit. Comet 3 Gian-Lo in Bork markings at Farnborough Air Show in September, 1954. The Comet 3, which flew for the first time on the 19th of July, 1954, was a Comet 2 lengthened by 15 feet 5 in, 4.70 m, and powered by Avon M502 engines developing 10,000 lbf, 44 kN. The variant added wing pinion tanks, and offered greater capacity and range. The Comet 3 was destined to remain a development series since it did not incorporate the fuselage strengthening modifications of the later series aircraft, and was not able to be fully pressurized. Only 2 Comet 3s began construction. Gian-Lo, the only airworthy Comet 3, was demonstrated at the Farnborough's Back Show in September 1954. The other Comet 3 airframe was not completed to production standard and was used primarily for ground-based structural and technology testing during development of the similarly sized Comet 4. Another 9 Comet 3 airframes were not completed and their construction was abandoned at Hatfield. In Borg colors, Lo was flown by John Cunningham in a marathon round-the-world promotional tour in December 1955. As a flying test, it was later modified with Avon Ra-29 engines fitted, as well as replacing the original long-span wings with reduced span wings as the Comet 3B and demonstrated in British European Airways B livery at the Farnborough Air Show in September 1958. Assigned in 1961 to the Blind Landing Experimental Unit, Blue, at Ray Bedford, the final test role played by Lo was in automatic landing system experiments. When retired in 1973, the airframe was used for foam arrestor trials before the fuselage was salvaged at BAE Woodford, to serve as the mock-up for the Nimrod. Comet 4, edit. The Comet 4 was a further improvement on the stretched Comet 3 with even greater fuel capacity. The design had progressed significantly from the original Comet 1, growing by 18 feet 6 in, 5.64 m, and typically seating 74 to 81 passengers compared to the Comet 1's 36 to 44. 119 passengers could be accommodated in a special charter seating package in the later 4C series. The Comet 4 was considered the definitive series, having a longer range, higher cruising speed and higher maximum takeoff weight. These improvements were possible largely because of Avon engines, with twice the thrust of the Comet 1's Ghosts. Deliveries to Borg began on the 30th of September 1958 with 2 48-seat aircraft, which were used to initiate the first scheduled transatlantic services. One Comet 4B, originally developed for Capital Airlines as the 4AM. The 4B featured greater capacity through a 2M longer fuselage, and a shorter wingspan, 18 were produced. 2 Comet 4C. This variant featured the Comet 4S wings and the 4BS longer fuselage, 28 were produced. The last 2 Comet 4C fuselages were used to build prototypes of the Hawker Siddeley Nimrod maritime patrol aircraft. A Comet 4C, SAR-7, was ordered by Saudi Arabian Airlines with an eventual disposition to the Saudi Royal Flight for the exclusive use of King Saud bin Abdul Aziz. Extensively modified at the factory, the aircraft included a VIP front cabin, a bed, special toilets with gold fittings and was distinguished by a green, gold and white color scheme with polished wings and lower fuselage that was commissioned from aviation artist John Stroud. Following its first flight, the special order Comet 4C was described as the world's first executive jet. Comet 5 proposal, edit. The Comet 5 was proposed as an improvement over previous models, including a wider fuselage with 5 abreast seating, a wing with greater sweep and podded Rolls-Royce Conway engines. Without support from the Ministry of Transport, the proposal languished as a hypothetical aircraft and was never realized. Hawker Siddeley Nimrod, edit. Main article, Hawker Siddeley Nimrod. The last 2 Comet 4C aircraft produced were modified as prototypes, 15148 and 15147, to meet a British requirement for a maritime patrol aircraft for the Royal Air Force, initially named Maritime Comet. The design was designated Type HS-801. This variant became the Hawker Siddeley Nimrod and production aircraft were built at the Hawker Siddeley factory at Woodford Aerodrome. Entering service in 1969, 5 Nimrod variants were produced. The final Nimrod aircraft were retired in June 2011. Operators, edit. Main article, List of de Havilland Comet operators. The original operators of the early Comet 1 and the Comet 1AM were Borg, Union Aero-Maritime de Transport and Air France. All early Comets were withdrawn from service for accident inquiries, during which orders from British Commonwealth Pacific Airlines, Japan Airlines, Linea Aeropostal Venezolana, National Airlines, Pan American World Airways and Painair do Brasil were cancelled. When the redesigned Comet 4 entered service, it was flown by customers Borg, Aerolíneas Argentinas, and East African Airways, while the Comet 4B variant was operated by customers B and Olympic Airways, and the Comet 4C model was flown by customers Kuwait Airways, Mexicana, Middle East Airlines, Misra Airlines and Sudan Airways. Other operators used the Comet either through leasing arrangements or through second-hand acquisitions. Borg's Comet 4S were leased out to Air Ceylon, Air India, Air Ecuador, Central African Airways and Qantas. After 1965 they were sold to Air Ecuador, Dan Air, Mexicana, Malaysian Airways, and the Ministry of Defense. B's Comet 4BS were chartered by Cyprus Airways, Malta Airways and Transportes Aéreas Portugueses. Channel Airways obtained 5 Comet 4BS from B in 1974 inclusive tour charters. Dan Air bought all of the surviving flyable Comet 4S from the late 1960s into the 1970s, some were for spares reclamation, but most were operated on the carrier's inclusive tour charters. A total of 48 Comets of all marks were acquired by the airline. In military service, the United Kingdom's Royal Air Force was the largest operator, with 51 Squadron, 1958-1975, Comet C2, 2R, 192 Squadron, 1957-1958, Comet C2, 2R, 216 Squadron, 1956-1975, Comet C2 and C4, and the Royal Aircraft Establishment using the aircraft. The Royal Canadian Air Force also operated Comet 1as, later retrofitted to 1XB, through its 412 Squadron from 1953 to 1963. Accidents and Incidents, edit. The Comet was involved in 25 hull loss accidents, including 13 fatal crashes which resulted in 492 fatalities. Pilot error was blamed for the type's first fatal accident, which occurred during takeoff at Karachi, Pakistan, on the 3rd of March 1953 and involved a Canadian Pacific Airlines Comet 1AM. 3 fatal Comet 1 crashes were due to structural problems, specifically British Overseas Airways Corporation Flight 783 on the 2nd of May 1953, British Overseas Airways Corporation Flight 781 on the 10th of January 1954, and South African Airways Flight 201 on the 8th of April 1954. These accidents led to the grounding of the entire Comet fleet. After design modifications were implemented, Comet services resumed on the 4th of October 1958, with Comet 4S. Comet 4 GAPDN crashed in the Spanish Montseny Range in July 1970 during a Dan Air flight. Pilot error resulting in controlled flight into terrain was blamed for 5 fatal Comet 4 accidents, an Aerolíneas Argentinas crash near Asunción, Paraguay, on the 27th of August 1959, Aerolíneas Argentinas Flight 322 at Campinas near São Paulo, Brazil, on the 23rd of November 1961. United Arab Airlines Flight 869 in Thailand's Khao Yai Mountains on the 19th of July 1962, a Saudi Arabian government crash in the Italian Alps on the 20th of March 1963, and United Arab Airlines Flight 844 in Tripoli, Libya, on the 2nd of January 1971. The Danish de Havilland comet crash in Spain's Montseny range on the 3rd of July 1970 was attributed to navigational errors by air traffic control and pilots. Other fatal Comet 4 accidents included a British European Airways crash in Ankara, Turkey, following instrument failure on the 21st of December 1961, a United Arab Airlines Flight 869 crashed during inclement weather near Bombay, India, on the 28th of July 1963, and the terrorist bombing of Cyprus Airways Flight 284 off the Turkish coast on the 12th of October 1967. 9 comets, including Comet 1S operated by BORC and Union Aero Maritime de Transport and Comet 4S flown by Aerolíneas Argentinas, Dan Air, Malaysian Airlines and United Arab Airlines, were irreparably damaged during takeoff or landing accidents that were survived by all on board. A hangar fire damaged a number 192 Squadron IAF Comet 2R beyond repair on the 13th of September 1957, and 3 Middle East Airlines Comet 4CS were destroyed by Israeli troops at Beirut, Lebanon, on the 28th of December 1968. Aircraft on display, edit. Since retirement, 3 early generation Comet airframes have survived in museum collections. The only complete remaining Comet 1, a Comet 1XB with the registration GeForce, the last Comet 1 built, is displayed at the RAF Museum Cosford. Though painted in BORC colors, it never flew for the airline, having been first delivered to Air France and then to the Ministry of Supply after conversion to 1XB standard. This aircraft also served with the RAF as X-Air Mate 23. The sole surviving Comet fuselage with the original square-shaped windows, part of a Comet 1AM registered FBGNX, has undergone restoration and is on display at the de Havilland Aircraft Museum near St Albans in Hertfordshire, England. A Comet C2 Sagittarius with serial XK699, later maintenance serial 7971M, was on display at the gate of RAF Lineham in Wiltshire, England from 1987. In 2012, with the planned closure of RAF Lineham, the aircraft was slated to be dismantled and shipped to the RAF Museum Cosford where it was to be reassembled for display. The move was cancelled due to the level of corrosion and the majority of the airframe was scrapped in 2013, the cockpit section going to the Boscombe Down Aviation Collection at Old Sarum Airfield. 6 complete Comet 4S are housed in museum collections. The Imperial War Museum Duxford has a Comet 4, GAPDB, originally in Dan Air colours as part of its flight line display, and later in BORC livery at its airspace building. A Comet 4B, GAPYD, is stored in a facility at the Science Museum at Writton in Wiltshire, England. Comet 4CS are exhibited at the Flugausstellung Peter Jr. at Hermeskeil, Germany, GBD, the Museum of Flight Restoration Center near Everett, Washington, N888WA, and the National Museum of Flight near Edinburgh, Scotland, GBDIX. The last comet to fly, Comet 4C Canopus, XS235, is kept in running condition at Bruntingthorpe Aerodrome, where fast taxi runs are regularly conducted. Since the 2000s, several parties have proposed restoring Canopus, which is maintained by a staff of volunteers, to airworthy, fully flight-capable condition. The Bruntingthorpe Aerodrome also displays a related Hawker Siddeley Nimrod Mr. 2 aircraft. Specifications, edit. Comet 4B3 view schematic, front, side, and dorsal views. Comet 1-3 view in silhouette, note differences in Comet 4 insert, reproduced in same scale. Variant Comet 1, Comet 2, Comet 3, Comet 4. Cockpit crew 4, 2 pilots, flight engineer, and radio operator / navigator. Passengers 36, 44, 58, 76, 56, 116. Length 93 feet, 28 m, 96 feet 1 in, 29.29 m, 111 feet 6 in, 33.99 m. Tail height 29 feet 6 in, 8.99 m. Wingspan 115 feet, 35 m. Wing area 2015 square feet, 187.2 m. 2121 square feet, 197.0 m. Aspect ratio 6.566.24. Airfoil NACA 63 a 116 mod root, NACA 63 a 112 mod tip. TO 110,000 pound, 50,000 kilograms, 120,000 pound, 54,000 kilograms, 150,000 pound, 68,000 kilograms, 156,000 pound, 71,000 kilograms. Turbojets, X4, Halford H.2 Ghost 50 RR Avon MK503/504 RR Avon MK502/521 RR Avon MK524. Unit thrust 5000 lbf, 22 kN, 7000 lbf, 31 kN, 10,000 lbf, 44 kN, 10,500 lbf, 47 kN. Range 1,300 mi, 2,400 kilometers, 2,300 mi, 4,200 kilometers, 2,300 mi, 4,300 kilometers, 2,802 mi, 5,190 kilometers. Cruising speed 400 kn, 740 kilometers per hour, 430 kn, 790 kilometers per hour, 450 kn, 840 kilometers per hour. Cruise altitude 42,000 feet, 13,000 m, 45,000 feet, 14,000 m, 42,000 feet, 13,000 m. In popular culture, edit. Main article, De Havilland Comet in fiction. See also, edit. 1 Arnold Alexander Hall. 2 Seymour Collection, an aerophilically collection relating to the comet in the British Library. Related development. 1 Hawker Siddeley Nimrod. 2 Hawker Siddeley Nimrod R1. 3 British Aerospace Nimrod AEW3. 4 BAE Systems Nimrod MIA4. Aircraft of comparable role, configuration, and era. 1 Avro Canada C-102 jetliner. 2 Boeing 707. 3 Convair 880. 4 Douglas DC-8. 5 Tupolev Tu-104. 6 Sudaviation Karav. Related lists. 1 List of civil aircraft. 2 List of jet airliners. References, edit.